Hello and welcome to another episode of Things That Spark Joy. So in this episode we're talking about drum machines, or more specifically a drum machine, the TR-626. So with these Things That Spark Joy episodes, what I'm attempting to do going forward is to try to make them relate to something else I've been talking about this week. And if you've watched the album musings episode, I was talking about 808 State, the album Gorgeous, and how the band's name 808 State comes from the Roland 808. Now I don't have a Roland TR-808, but I do have a 626, although as I've probably said numerous times, I don't think time has been fair on these devices, and I don't think they're that highly rated. I really liked it. It was really useful at the time, and the points of these episodes, really the reason why I do them, is for me to just reflect on the circumstances under which I acquired a particular artifact that I own, and if there's anything interesting stories around it or things to do with the basic functionality. I'm not going to do any of plugging this in and listening to the sounds, and generally with these episodes I won't do that, but if something comes up that's fairly easy to show what the output is, I'll do it. But really this is just about the general functionality and a few stories around the circumstances around acquiring this and various other things. So I have the device itself is in pretty good condition still, and I don't have the box, but I do have the original manual. There we go, the owner's manual, and I'll be flicking through this again because it brings up some interesting things related to functionality of these devices of this period. So the big difference, I suppose, between this and other devices, 707, 606, 505, 808, is that a number of these were designed with a more Latin influenced drum sound to them, of which this was one. So I don't know how clearly this is coming up, but if you look at where the actual pads themselves are, and you can just plug this in and tap away on it if you like. These normally, most drum machines have several different modes. You can sort of tap away on them in real time. You can record in real time, and you can also record in step time. Whenever I've used these, it's nearly always in step time. So the sounds themselves, you've got 16, but some double up, so that's how you get more sounds. So we've got like the open and closed hi-hat here, some toms, high tom 2-1, mid tom 2-1, low tom 2-1, the snare drum sound. So there's actually 3 snare drums on here, so 1, 2, 3, and then also a rim shot. We've got a couple of bass drum sounds, and then along the top here we've got things like tambourine and also cowbell, then low agogo, I think that is, low timbale, high agogo, high timbale, hand clap, low conga, shaker, open conga, claves, mute high conga, a china cymbal, a crash cymbal, a cup, and a ride cymbal. So I actually very rarely used any of the sort of Latin sounds. The reason why I purchased this particular model over anything else is it was cheap compared to the others, I think because of the sound choices, and with the basic functionality you could still get the regular drum sounds out of it. In terms of programming it, there's lots of obviously buttons here which help with that. There's the these track step throughs and pattern step throughs. There's the different modes of play between obviously playing it back once you've done the composition and writing. We've got stuff related to programming the tempo and the measure, and all these other things that allow you to flick through the pattern groups and then to actually change the values when you're programming or they've been programmed in. Now, where it gets interesting, so well, and additionally down here you've got a level and an accent and a tempo and a volume, is when if you flip one of those over on the side with these models, it was pretty what's the word that actually probably easier, so I go through this and then it'll all fall into place. But you've got obviously power, DC in, there's a right and left, and then headphones, but these allow you to have separate channels come out for the ride, the crash, the hi-hat, the high tom, the mid tom, the low tom, the snare and the bass drum if you want to, so you can feed them out to a mixing desk. Then you have a start-stop switch where you can just put a foot switch in if you want to sort of trigger the starting and stopping of the drum machine via a foot switch. There is MIDI in and out, but then there's these various tape in and outs, triggers and tape syncs as well, which we'll get onto it in a moment. Also, you have this memory card slot down the end, which I'll be talking about as well. Additionally, if you really want to, you can put batteries in it, but this thing does gobble up batteries. So why did I end up with this? Well, what happened was for a brief period of the time in the 80s, I was in a band. It was put together by myself and another guitarist. Never really... ultimately I never gigged, and there's a reason why that's the case, so I get onto it. The band itself did in the end for a period of time after I left, but myself and the original guitarist were like the founding members of the band, and then we built a band through that, and we were practicing for a period of time. And this came about as a result of practicing. So we had a phenomenon that's not unfamiliar to anybody that's in a band. We got through quite a few drummers. Nobody exploded or, got abducted by aliens or anything. But it was getting quite frustrating because often you wouldn't find out until the night of rehearsing, and I like having a drum, some sort of drums there. So initially we fell back on my friend's TR-110, but it wasn't really working. We'd actually used that originally to put some demos together so that we could play prospective members of the bands the stuff we were writing on, because we did a mixture of our own stuff and covers. That was the idea. But I thought it was nice to have something with a bigger memory on it that you could program in, patterns which are a little bit closer to what the drummers had been playing. Not necessarily everything like the fills, but just the general beats which were contributing to the syncopation of certain songs. So I purchased one of these, this one obviously, and proceeded to fill it up with the various beats. And of course there's multiple tracks on this, but also you've got multiple songs and things like that. But I basically just used the pattern feature. So let me just go into the manual a little bit. So just to quickly act as a reminder to myself. So obviously you can play and write the patterns. And on here, I think what it does is, it calls, on some devices, they might call it a song. On here, it calls it a track. Now, that on multiple devices where you've got like multi-tracks within a song, that gets confusing. But here they're referring to like track to mean a composition or like a song, as opposed to necessarily individual tracks on a multi-track. Now this is where it got interesting, because we were doing a cover of, I think it was Touch Too Much by AC/DC, and one evening when I didn't have much to do, I wasn't going out anywhere or going down to the pub, I took it upon myself to attempt to program the whole of the AC/DC song Touch Too Much into this device, because I actually had the tab for the drum. Well, it had the tab for the whole song, but I had drum tab. So I literally went through and programmed in all the patterns that were used, the various variations, and then strung them together as a single track. And I got to the end and actually had just enough memory to put that in, and that was it. There wasn't any other room on the memory to do anything else. So yeah, that was that's when I discovered the limitations of this. Now, that's a nice lead into the interesting methods by which you can effectively dump tracks off on these sort of devices. So obviously we've moved on a lot now. This was when I purchased this in the 80s. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, computers were around, but we didn't have the internet, and there was some. I'm trying to think at which time there were a particular home PC came in that lended itself to doing home recordings. Yeah, no, I can't remember. Anyway, this is very much of its time. So one thing you could do is obviously download to the memory card. So Roland made these memory cards which worked in multiple devices. That was a possibility. Another way, if you look into the manual, is you can actually download to a tape, which I found amusing, because when I first started doing computing and was using Commodore PETs, that's basically how you backed up your programs. There was a tape on the Commodore, a tape machine, and you buy this C15 cassette, like a 15-minute cassette, and record the bleeps down to the tape, and then when you wanted to play the program, you'd wind back to the start again, put the tape in and read it off of there. And in this book there's a picture here of a similar sort of setup where you're connecting some sort of slightly higher end tape machine than probably was on the Commodore PET to the device, and then dumping the device's contents out into onto the tape. And then obviously there's the whole question of getting it back off again once it's on there. I never attempted that. So once I had a bit of a failure with trying to get the whole of Touch Too Much on the drum machine, I went back to just using very simple patterns for when we were bereft of a drummer. Just in passing, something I wanted to mention, and it's not a feature on this device, is later on a lot of MIDI devices you had the capacity to dump out through MIDI. I think on MIDI track, was it 0? Anyway, there was the specific track that was allocated to that, and I actually had a Yamaha device which the discs in it looked like very much like mini discs, but they weren't. They predate mini discs, I believe, and they're quite small. They're like a 3¼ inch computer disc, but just smaller. And they went into this, I think it was a Yamaha device. It was like a little drive, and later devices, I think it was my QY10, which is more of a a MIDI composing device, that I could actually dump out the memory to the discs, so I could, effectively wipe the QY10, load it up with new stuff, and record even more, and have, previously having backed up all the other songs on there. But with this, the real only other options were to, use a memory card or save to tape, because this, as far as I know, from what I've refreshed my memory looking at the manual, you can't do a MIDI dump of this. Not that I'm aware of it. Anyway, there may be perhaps a hack in this. The other thing that's possible with this, and you probably saw on the back, because of the presence of sync stuff on there, you can sync this up to, various devices. You can sort of daisy chain using MIDI, and there are, things where you can sync the drum machine up to like a reel-to-reel, if it has the feature. So it's a pretty interesting device, but like I said, at the time, I think it was looked down a bit on, because with the addition of these other sounds, I'm assuming it would, lessen other potential regular drum patterns that you would have, and if you weren't using it for that particular style of music, it wasn't good. It wasn't, what's the word? Its utility was somewhat diminished. But for me, who wanted a step up from a Boss DR110, and was happy with the drum sounds on here for what I needed it for, which was just to have some patterns to play against when you have errant drummers. And this is no reflection on drummers generally, it's just from my brief experience of trying to keep them. It was a great workaround, and lots of fun sitting there putting patterns in. And like I said, generally I would recorded just patterns and kept it simple. And the one time I tried to string them together to create a track or a song, as it might be called on other devices, I ran out of memory. So hope you've enjoyed this episode of Things That Spark Joy. Certainly, as you can hear, it's brought a smile to my face thinking about the fun and games with my TR-626. Thanks for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next video.